that. I apparently I apologize for seeming that the auction was crazy, because I saw Evie drinking water, and we had come back from a dinner. We went out with friends, and so I just got so thirsty. I drank like 2 of these right down, and it was ice cold, and I don't know, and I just felt sick. And then I was not able to, I was trying my best to put the numbers in for people. I'm sorry about that. I'm willing to do a redo at another time for anybody that's disappointed in what happened, but I'm sorry, and I'm human, and I didn't feel good, and that's the way it is, and so sorry about that. But I'm going to go and feel a little bit better now, and I'm going to go to some of the Delphi trial transcripts, because we're on part 5 now, and I'm going to do a little bit of that. Let me see. So this will be part 5, and so we were on the direct examination of Sergeant Jason Page. And let me just make sure that you can hear before I even get into going through this. Let me just make sure, okay? You can hear before. Yep. Okay, perfect. Hey, tree dog, how are you? Okay. So let me get back to my thing here. Okay. So direct examination of Sergeant Jason Page. So again, they ask him, would he speak? This is prosecution first, of course. Direct examination. Would you state your name? He answers, Jason Page. Where are you employed? He answers, with the Indiana State Police. Could you spell your first and last name? JASON PAGE. And about how long have you been an Indiana State Police officer? 24 years. And what is your current assignment? I've been a crime scene investigator for 16 years. When is the last time that I did this? It was yesterday we got the verdict. Yeah, so it was the day before, I guess. Okay. When you began with the state police, did you attend the academy? He says, I did. What's the name of that academy? He answers, the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy. And did you complete that training? I did. Okay. So we're not going to go through all of his education. It's like 2 pages here. And I don't think that's really important to anyone else. He does say he has training as a CSI, crime scene investigator. Do you have specialized training? Yes, he says he does. And he goes through all of that about the Indiana State Police Laboratory and how he works closely. And he works with Dr. Darren Wolf and Dr. Scott Wagner. And what does Dr. Wolf practice out of Lafayette area? So he goes going on. This is page after page talking about all of this, okay? So let's get to the testimony that I think everybody is interested in. And they say, so once you were contacted by Sergeant Olahi, well, first off, do you know approximately what time he contacted you? He says, I think it was sometime afternoon. It was shortly afternoon. And do you know what time you arrived? He said, I think I arrived 1:30, maybe slightly before that. And when you arrived, where did you go? He said, I was asked to park my vehicle up at the old cemetery, the Delphi cemetery area. It was kind of a staging area. So I parked there, and then I walked down this kind of steep grade, this hill, where I was told that the other officers were. Did you later, perhaps the following day, go to the Monon High Bridge? I did. The area where the cemetery is located, the land between the cemetery and the Monon High Bridge and the bridge itself, are those all in Carroll County, Indiana? That's his question. He answers, they are. The question is, you were beginning to tell us what you did upon arrival. Did you leave the cemetery area and proceed to some other location? He answers, I did. I walked down from the cemetery to where the officers were staged. There was crime scene barrier tape that was set up, and the officers that were present, there were numerous officers there. They were outside the barrier tape, and they had a crime scene log that was being maintained. And I met with Brian Olehy and Dwayne Datzman. Dwayne Datzman is another crime scene investigator that was required to assist. The question, have you worked with Olehy before, I think you said? Answer, I have, many times. Question, have you worked with Dwayne Datzman? Answer, many times. Question, was he a sergeant at the time as well? Answer, he is. Question, and you were all trained, experienced CSI investigators? Answer, correct. Question, what was the purpose of you meeting there at the edge of the crime scene tape at that point? Answer, primarily to get the initial information or the facts that were known at the time. And then we came up with a rough plan of how we were going to work for that day. The basic plan was for the three of us, CSI, to work the area that was inside the barrier tape that had been established. And it was, I estimate it was approximately the size of a football field, roughly. And then our primary focus was going to be the immediate area of where the girls were located, or where I was told they were located. And then at the same time, we had other officers that were there at the scene. We arranged for them to search outside that immediate area from the area where they were reported to have last been seen, to the barricade tape that we had set up that area. And then there was also dive team, or people assigned to a dive team that were doing searches of Deer Creek itself. So there was a water rescue team working the creek, and in the creek, he's asked? Yes, I saw them there when I arrived. Question, did they have distinct apparel or uniform suits that they wear when they're working in the water? Answer, they did. Question, did you prepare a diagram that would be helpful with the topography of the local area from the area of the High Bridge to the cemetery? Answer, I did. Question, and did you do one a little bit zoomed in a little closer? Answer, I did. And what do those two diagrams help to illustrate? Answer, due to the trees and all the foliage, some of the satellite photographs or the helicopter photographs, it's difficult to get an understanding of the topography of the area, so I merely took a topographical map and then just placed basic landmarks on top of them so they can be compared to other maps. Question, did you strike that? Let me ask this again. Did you designate, you and Sergeant Datzman and Sergeant Olehy, designate an area that you called Ground Zero? Answer, we did. Question, and where was Ground Zero? Answer, through our search of the area initially, we do a visual examination just to see what items that are obvious to us at the time, and it seemed like from that and doing our continual search, all the primary evidence that we observed was confined within an area of approximately 30 feet in diameter. We did not put crime scene tape around this, but this was the area that we pretty much worked the entire day, and then other officers remained outside. Question, did you also prepare a diagram based upon images that were maintained or taken on February 14th? Did you prepare a diagram that showed the relative location of the two victims in relation to one another and the immediate area at the Ground Zero? Answer, I did. Question, I'm going to show you what we've marked as States Exhibit 18, 19, and 20. And I'm going to ask if you can identify those for the jury, please. Answer, State Exhibit 18, 19, and 20 are diagrams I prepared. Question, and are the 18 and 19 the topographical ones that you prepared, and then 20, is that ground zero drawing based upon the scene photographs? Answer, correct. Okay, and then how did you do that? Answer, I did an overlay of a 3D diagram or the 3D scan that was later done, and added scene photographs when I'm up in a tree and I'm looking down 90 degrees. And when I do transparencies and do an overlay, both the scans and the scene photographs almost perfectly matched. And then I trace the items that were not in ground zero. So therein, I wouldn't call them to scale 100%, but I put this scale as approximate. Did you, with regard to 18, 19, and 20, did you prepare those after I took your statement back in March? One second, because I'm just trying to see why Razi's in. Because this is Razi questioning him now. Okay, so the state's exhibits were admitted, and then, okay, then we're back to our direct examination. Okay. They asked him to come down there, and will you show the jury on a diagram the location of the cemetery? He says the cemetery's in this area, and where's the Monon Bridge? Monon Bridge is in this area, is pointing out all this stuff on the map, right? Deer Creek runs from the left side of the right side through the middle of the frame of this image, and what is downstream on Deer Creek? They ask him. He says, if I recall correctly, I believe it runs from right to left. And then they said, so it's flowing towards the left? Answer, correct. Question, it's a little hard for us to see at this point, but there's a yellow rectangle triangle right there. Would you describe what that is? He says that is the general location of where the barrier tape was. So for orientation, I parked up in the cemetery and I walked down the grade to the floodplain area, what we call it, and then the barrier tape in this general location. It's approximately the size of a football field. Question, and there is, I think we'll see on the next slide a little bit clearer, but describe for the jury the topography from the cemetery to the crime scene tape. And he says this section here beneath the cemetery is pretty rough. I don't remember going through that. I could have. It's been 7+ years, but I think most of us walk down the side, more towards the right of this image, and the grade's a little less steep, but you can see by the markings on the map that it's fairly steep area. Areas closer to, on the cemetery side of Deer Creek, between the high bridge and the barrier tape, the topographical map shows it's much more sheer, and those can be seen in the scene photographs as well, just to compare the different grades. Question, this is a sheer area you're talking about? Correct. One of them? Correct. And did you later spend, on the following days after the 14th, did you spend an amount of time here across the creek from the crime scene tape area? Answer, I did. Question, it's a little bit of a zoomed in look. There's a line, a yellow dotted line. Isn't that the crime scene perimeter? Would you describe for the jury what that is, please? Answer, that is a rope line I use just to further designate our approach in and out of the crime scene as we work throughout the day. I put a little arrow to show that this is the general location where the crime scene log was, and then we walked straight in, and I tied a rope to a small tree, and there was kind of a natural tree line in this area. And then when we walked this initial distance from where the crime scene was to where we tied the rope, we were also systematically examining the ground to see if there would be any potential items of evidence there or any disturbed items. And then as we're walking through that area and we don't see anything, we feel that there's a safe place that we can approach. And then the same thing was done. After I tied the yellow rope to the tree, we spent a great deal of time just walking the path to make sure that there's nothing there. And we were able to get to a point approximately 20 to 30 feet away from what we later called ground zero to do our examination. And that's when the dotted line designates. Question, and what other function did this rope, yellow rope, serve for you as investigators working the scene? Answer, it also provided a landmark in some of the photographs. For example, in this open courtroom, if we were working in this room and we have a CSI or other investigators, and the one's working one path, another one works another path, it'd create too much disturbance. So we basically used it as a landmark. So if I used the railing in front of the judge's bench, we would walk along that line, and then with this tape area for the cords down here, that would be like the rope line. We would follow that in and then go to the scene. Question. So your exit and entrance into that scene, as you were there that day, you followed that path for what reason? Answer. Because we knew that there were no items of potential evidence there, and we were going to continue all throughout the day to do additional searches in these other locations. We were merely trying to find a safe location that we could walk in, do an initial approach of the bodies, and just see what the evidence was there. Question. You arrived into that crime scene taped area sometime before 2 p.m. Is that correct? Answer. Correct. And you left that crime scene area that evening at approximately what time? Answer. 10:20 p.m. Question. Go to the next slide. This is Exhibit 20. And what are we looking at here? Answer. This is a top-down, bird's-eye view of the items that we observed within what we call Ground Zero. Question. And describe for the jury the objects in what they're looking at on the exhibit in front of you. Answer. The items on the far right, this blob, I just labeled it tree. I put a legend at the top because sometimes arrows can be disorienting and cover up the area. So there's a legend at the top that shows these other items, but the ones I have labeled, there's a tree, which is this blob on the far right-handed side, and on the far left-handed side, there's another blob, and that's also been labeled as a tree. So it'd be like the tree was cut, and you're looking top-down on it. Question. Sergeant Page, you stated that one of the resources you used to create this Ground Zero diagram was 3D imaging photography, and does that capture an area from top down like that and display it on its imaging, the tree, the top of the tree that's depicted in your diagram? Answer, yes. And go ahead, what else do we see? Answer, the outline of this body is Libby German. The outline of this body to the left of Libby is Abby Williams. And then these gray, linear, irregular shaped items, these are various branches that were located on top of their bodies. There's a larger one that I would call a limb that's on top of Libby's body. There are others that are on the ground, twigs and branches near their feet. And then on the legend, there's a dotted circle that represents an exposed dirt area. So the only disturbed ground where it was obvious that leaves and other items were missing was this little indentation in the ground at the bottom of this diagram. And then the pale red areas on the diagram are the primary blood stains that we located and observed within the scene. Question. Thank you. Instead of having you return to your seat, I'm just going to have you go ahead, hand you a number of exhibits if you're comfortable with that, and ask that you take your time. Well, why don't we let you have a seat so you can use I'm going to hand you States Exhibits 21 to 63. I'm going to ask you to look at them with this question in mind. Are those photographs that you took on February 14th, February 15th, and February 16th at this location that you described? Answer, yes. Question. Do they truly and accurately depict the scene and illustrate your testimony? Answer, they do. Then, Sergeant Page, why don't you go ahead and return to the screen and we'll proceed. This would be Exhibit 21. What are we looking at here, sir? The photograph was taken from the vantage point of where I was standing after I signed into the crime scene log, and I'm facing Deer Creek. In the foreground, at the bottom center of the scene, is the crime scene barrier tape. And then you can see parallel just above it, Deer Creek in the distance. Farther beyond in the frame, you can primarily see it in the upper left-hand portion. This is the other side of Deer Creek, and it's a much higher elevated grade. This is private property on this side, and in the center of the frame of this image, when it's zoomed up, you can see that there's yellow rope that's dangling from the tree. So that's the rope that I tied. So after we examined the area and the barrier tape straight in, we didn't see any items of potential evidence in that area. I then went back to the barrier tape just to document the process, and I photographed the rope before I strung it out. Question. I think we can expand it slightly maybe, but it's right in this area here. Answer, it is. It's tied to a small tree, and the rest of the rope is just dangling on the ground. Question. And are the location of the bodies of Abby and Libby, are they there in the frame of the photograph? Answer, they are not. They would be located farther, near the left-hand side of the frame. Exhibit 22, what do we see here? Answer, on the right side of the frame, you can see a small tree that I tied the yellow rope to, with the rest of the rope, as I previously described, is on the ground. And then in the middle of the frame, just left of the center, in the distance, is the body of Libby and Abby. These trees here appear to have a natural line, and then the topography, even though it's more flat in this area, there is some variation to it. So there's almost like a small little ridge, and these trees are all along that area, and this is the path that we took to make our ingress. Question. Is this area flat? Answer. It's not completely flat, but it's flatter than other areas. It's very hilly and steep in most of the other locations. Question. Is there dips and small little areas of the area going up and down throughout that area? Answer. There are. I would consider this is a floodplain area. Question. And what do we see in Exhibit 23? Answer. The rope line in the previous image is now located on the far left-hand side of the tree, or rather of the image here, and the rope is on the ground. And all this is in the previous image. I took it with the rope on the right-hand side of the image. And now I've kind of stepped off this natural tree line just to show the vantage point on the other side towards the bodies of Libby and Abby. In the center of the screen, slightly above in the background, you can see the farther perimeter area of the crime scene barrier tape. And then Deer Creek kind of moves around this bend around above in this image, around where that barrier tape is. And then it kind of curves around off to the right-hand side. You can also see in this area that this plane kind of dips down a little bit. So this area from the left center to the middle kind of dips down a little bit. So there are just variations to observe as you're looking at the image. Question. Point again to where the body of Libby is. Answer. The right-hand center portion of the frame is the body of Libby, adjacent to the tree. Question. And Abby would be just to her left or to our left? Answer. Yes. Exhibit 25, I believe this is. Answer. This is a close-up from the same basic vantage point using a zoom lens. I just merely zoomed up on the same location to see the girls' bodies from the place I was standing. Libby is at the base of this tree, near the right side. The left side of the frame, left lower center, is Abby, and you can see in the center horizon, just above the center, is the crime scene barrier tape, and you can also see the variations of the topography of the ground in this area. Question. As you're taking photographs, what is your process that you follow in taking crime scene photographs? Answer. Every crime scene I work has the same general process where I photograph from general to specific. So I always want to show the general location. For example, if it's a house that's in a suburban neighborhood, I want to show not just that the house that the crime scene's at, but I want to show the neighborhood in general so we can get an idea of what we're looking at. Or if it's a rural house surrounded by farm acreage, that would be significant too, because in that context, maybe there were no witnesses because it's in a remote location like that, for example. And this particular scene, all those initial photographs were to show the general area, its topography, the relation of the creek and other landmarks, and the bodies of the deceased victims. Question. Exhibit 26, does that show the large limb that there's over a portion of Libby's body? Answer, it does. And I believe in the foreground is this portion of exposed dirt that I'd mentioned earlier in the diagram, and I believe it's State Exhibit 20. There's a large limb on top of her, and then this photograph too is the wider shots I consider very general. This is what I consider more of a medium shot to show the immediate area of the girls' bodies and their location, and this is generally the area that this bowl, this circle of trees around this area is what we later determined to be ground zero. Question: does photo 26 illustrate the kind of topography that the girls' bodies are within? Answer: it does. Question: just briefly, what do you mean by that? Answer: it's kind of like a slight grade from above Abby's body, and these trees are much higher up. So if the horizon line of this pointer stick is right here in the middle, you can kind of see how as it raises up towards the left. The immediate area where Libby is kind of more of a valley type area. And then in the distance, this grassy area that you see in the center of the frame near the top, this is the bank of the creek. See a bit of a rise there, and then there's trees, and then this darker portion, the kind of cross section that follows the upper middle horizon line, is another grade for this very sheer surface. And in this area, the far right-handed corner, you can see there's a coloration difference between the grass that's this dark, I'm sorry, I touched the screen. Question: all right. Answer: from the grass that creates one band of color, and then there's a darker color, and then there's a darker brown, and then there's a lighter brown, and then you can see the skyline with the trees and the horizon. The lighter band color, that's where there was an access road. And there's a slight increased grade that goes up to the private property off in the distance. Question: this photo you're moving around in a sort of circular fashion or to your right as you're taking these photos? Answer: I am. Question again: you move slightly to your right to capture that view? Answer: I am. And just for landmarks, you can see in the distance, in the center of the frame along the horizon line, is the crime scene barrier tape, the portion of it. Question: as you're standing taking this photograph, where's the creek? Is it behind you? Answer: I believe the creek would be over my right shoulder-ish. Kind of curves around, but it's going to be on the left side, or I'm sorry, the right side of the frame and in this image generally. Question: and flows around through past in a curvature fashion, is that correct? Answer: yes. And the way that I'm standing oriented towards the screen, the right side of the screen as I'm facing it, this is the general location my body was in relation to the creek. So the creek would have been towards my back and then moving off to the right. Could we return to the previous exhibit? For orientation purposes, on the left side of the screen, you can see two yellow lines. That's one's near the top, that's the barrier tape, and then the one that's below is the rope line. You can see where my rope line goes from left to right. It's tied around another small tree. I'm sorry, I touched the screen again. It's kind of hard not to do that. But anyway, you can see where the rope line comes to the base of some other trees, and that's basically where we made our approach. So in this particular exhibit, you can see a foot of Libby German, and then this is the limb that I mentioned before. Not too far from her foot, I believe, is this exposed dirt area, and then you can see the rope in the distance. So this would be the path that we took in from left to right in this frame, but along the rope line. And then beyond the rope line, because it kind of gets confusing with all the yellow lines, that's actually the barrier tape. And just for visual impression, on the film it looks close, but it's actually quite some distance away, and then it wraps around clear past the other parts of the frame towards the right. Okay, question. You're describing exhibit 28. Let's go to 29. You've just moved slightly again, and is the body or the bodies of the victims obscured in this photo? Answer: not necessarily. You can see the body in the center lower portion of the frame, and you can see the body of Abby Williams. The body of Libby appears to be obscured from the large limb and the other tree. I'm moving counterclockwise as these photographs are being taken. And then again, you can see in the left of the corner horizon area the rope line in this location, and then it dangles down. And then the crime scene barrier tape is in the distance. And in the far distance, this actually has a pretty good picture where you can see more of that gray, because That gray where the cemetery is, it goes off the frame, more to the left, but it's very difficult to photograph because you can't see the skyline because it goes kind of straight up. So this area, it starts to taper down in the far distance. So you get an idea of how steep that was, and then off to the right side of the frame, that's the direction of the creek. Question, Exhibit 30, and you continued in our counterclockwise route here as you're taking photographs? Answer, yes. Question, 31, 32, answer. In State Exhibit 32, you can see the rope line better, which trees it was attached to, and then as it comes into the scene, and in the distance, you can see officers that are outside the crime scene barrier tape. And then in red, with that, I believe yellow helmets or something of that sort. It's hard to make out, but I believe those are members of the dive team. Question, and photographs 33, State Exhibit 33, we're looking with the creek in the background. Answer, correct. Question, and this is just, again, you're moving counterclockwise. So is there anything of note that you noticed in this photograph besides getting a picture of where the creek is in relation to the bodies? Answer, could you be more specific? Question, well, let me ask, if someone were at the bank of the creek in this area or across the creek, would the bodies of the victims be obscured? Answer, I don't recall me going across the creek where the bodies were there, but I did go across the creek for the next 2 days and I took additional photography, and there are variations there, and I don't know how difficult it would be to see, but question, 34, you're elevated where you take this photograph. Answer, yes, I have a ladder that's in my truck, so I extended the ladder. I put it in various locations so I could get more of a top-down view. One of the methods I used in my photography is for every scene, I not only go from the general to the medium to the specific to take technical photos. I should also note that photography is continual. We take photographs when we arrive. Every activity we do, we photograph. You go from the least intrusive to the most intrusive, so we'll photograph everything as it is in its place. So if I was doing the courtroom now, I would have all the items on these desks exactly where they are and show them from the general to the medium to the specific, but I also will document things from the top down so you can kind of have a visual map from a bird's eye view of the relationship, because it's all about the relationships of these different items. So they look one particular way from eye level as you're standing, but then I'll get more than 90 degrees and photograph downwards, and when I can, I get my camera down as low as I can to show the low-lying surfaces on the ground plane, but then also from low to high in case there'd be any evidence or stains or something, for example, underneath the table. So this in part of the process where I'm not quite 90 degrees, but I'm on a ladder and I'm showing kind of a 45-degree angle top down just to show the relationship of the girls' bodies with the ground zero area with Deer Creek in the background. You can see how this floodplain kind of continues in the distance where it's lighter, and then where it gets darker is a more of a steeper grade up to the other side. The Monon Bridge is located. It can't be seen with all the trees in this view, but it would be this area near the horizon line in the top center of this image. Question, Exhibit 35, is that another top-down view? Answer, correct. And in this image, question, no, go ahead. Answer, in this image it gives a better viewpoint. There's a red stained area here on the ground that is more visible than in the previous photographs. Question 36. This is a top-down view where I'm in a ladder between the crack of this tree and on. I photographed down a 90-degree angle to map out different items within the scene, and this is one of the images I used in conjunction with a 3D scan of the scene to put the locations of all the various items. Question, Exhibit 37, and now we go to 38. There you are. You continued your counterclockwise movement of the creek in the background. Is that correct? Answer, correct. And in this particular image, I used a technique called fill flash. Because of all the shadows, it's difficult to see. And to take out the contrast, this image shows that there is another blood stain, apparent blood stain, on the ground at the bottom of the frame. And then the upper middle portion, you can see the bodies of Libby and Abby. And then at the top, you can see where Deer Creek is located in relationship to them. Question. The tree that's in the image in the foreground with the victims in the background, did you examine that tree as well? Answer, I did. Question. And what did you notice on that tree? Answer. This was the only tree in the area that I observed bloodstain evidence in the portion of the tree. I don't know offhand how high it was, maybe 3 feet. Without looking at measurements, I can't remember. There were stains on this face side of the tree, and then halfway between where the stain is and the base of the tree at the ground on the right-hand side of this image, to the right-hand side of the tree as we're looking, was another area of bloodstain evidence. And then beyond this, the larger stain I mentioned earlier in the other state exhibits is probably obscured from this tree. Exhibit 39, does this illustrate the location of the large blood area that you had on the ground zero diagram? Answer, it does. Question, would you point that out to the jury, please? Answer, it's in the center lower portion of the frame. You can see it in relation to their feet. And this photograph also shows the grade of the terrain in the area, and you can see the grass. And this is one of the photographs I'd mentioned earlier where I start to get from a lower vantage point. So I want to get everything from a 360 general to a more specific from a high level when I got from a higher vantage point down. Now this is the portion where I'm getting down near the ground level, and then I took hundreds of photographs. Many of them are from an eye level vantage point, and some of them are low to high, and this is an example of one of those photographs. Exhibit 40, now we'll go to 41. Is that a large stain that you had in Exhibit 39? Answer, it is. Question. You were there in person. Describe what you noticed about the quantity of blood that you saw at that location. Answer. Later during the search, and this is the following day, I did a systematic search of this entire area. So I would examine all the branches, all the twigs, any items in the immediate area, and look to see if there'd be any items of potential evidence on those items. And then later, when I removed all the leaves and such, the whole area seemed to be saturated still with a large quantity of blood. Question. 41 or 42 shows the image of Abby Williams? Answer, it does. Question. I'm sorry, I meant to have a lead-in to that photograph. You took close-up photographs for what reason? Answer. To show more details, to show trace evidence. Question. And the next slide is a close-up of Libby's face? Answer. Correct. Question. And you were wanting to document the pattern of blood and where the blood was located on her body? Answer. It's in just general, showing all the details you can. One of the things I do in death investigations is make sure I focus on the head and the hands and the feet and any other items or injuries that are going to be on the bodies. But I often, and we did this at the scene, I'll take a tarp and I'll lay it. We'll examine the area that we're immediately standing in to see if there's any other items of potential evidence that are apparent to us. If this area appears clear, this is part of what I mentioned earlier about you're going from the least intrusive to the most intrusive. So we're not moving anything at this time, but you have to eventually get closer to the evidence you're looking at. So I put a tarp, could have been a plastic bag, on the ground. So I'm not transferring anything or disturbing anything. And then I spent a great deal of time with each one of the victims, just looking at their hands, analyzing them with a flashlight. A lot of times you use a flashlight and you look with oblique lighting to see if you can see any trace evidence on their fingers. We're looking at their hands. There's just dozens and dozens of similar photographs like this. That's a representative photograph of some of these. In this particular exhibit, there were fragments of organic material. Question. Sorry? Answer. On the face, and that's what we're looking at. There's some here in the mouth, some in the eye, some in the forehead, that shows the relationship of the head with the organic material. Question. Would this photograph 44 be of the left hand of Abby Williams? Answer. It is. On the lower right-hand portion of this image, the bark that's covered in moss in this area, that's actually the large tree. And then this is her left hand. Question. 45, 46 is her right hand? Answer, yes. In the upper left-hand corner, you can see the skin on the side of her body just for orientation purposes. And again, this is a representation photograph of numerous close-up photographs showing details, looking for stains, trace evidence, and anything else that could be in the area, would be in the area. Question 48 in the photograph here. Did you have as a team concentrate on one area, one victim before you went to the next victim? Answer, we did. Question, what was the purpose of that? Answer, well, in the particular case of Libby, because she's unclothed, it's just easier to see trace evidence and any injuries and document this area. And because Libby had multiple layers of clothing and stuff, we knew that a lot, and he's wrong there, he means Abby. We knew that a lot of the trace evidence is going to be between those layers, so it was just easier to start the one, and quite frankly, we had to start someplace, so we just started with her. Question, but you didn't, my point is, you did not do both victims at the areas around them and examining them. You did not do that at the same time. Answer, no. Question, you did one after the other. Answer, correct. Can we go back to the previous state's exhibit just for confusion? Question 48. Answer, in this particular image, the tree to the left, there's a lot of red hue. It's kind of a brown reddish, at least from that vantage point. I'm standing looking at the screen. It looks red, but on closer inspection, this is all just areas of bark, and there were no stains on the surfaces of those trees. Question, Exhibit 49 shows a blood pattern on her right thigh. Answer, yes. Question, and I think that's documented in some other photographs we'll get to later today, but I wanted to make sure you captured that as well. Answer, yes. Question, did you take photographs of that from various angles? Answer, it's just part of the process. Any item that's going to be captured in this, again, it's just a process of going from general to specific. Those pictures are all taken prior to moving any objects or bodies or moving the bodies. Question, State's Exhibit 50 has numbers on the ground. Would you explain to the jury what they're seeing? Answer, this is a photograph I took later that night with the flash, or maybe it just appears to be later because the effect of the flash. I can't remember which, but on the left-hand side of the frame, the tree is the one that I saw with the blood evidence on it. You can see the stains in the upper portion near the upper left-hand side of the image, and then midway down, closer to the ground, you can see another blood stain pattern that we located. I can't remember which. I think it might be where this placard number 1 is. I didn't put these placards there. They were from Brian Olehy. So as he was marking the areas that he was going to collect representative stain samples, but I believe one designates the area where another stain of blood was on the ground. Can't recall what 2 marks. It could be some other leaves that may have been stained. I can't recall. Question, did Sergeant Olehy, as the CSI for this region, did he collect all the evidence from the crime scene? Answer, the majority of it. Question, on February 14th? Answer, yes. Question, and that was one of the roles he played? You did not collect evidence on February 14th? Answer, I did not. My role is to assist Sergeant Olehy as needed. Question, you see a few other numbers there, 3 and 4, and they were replaced by Sergeant Olehy? Answer, I believe they were. Question, and were they marking evidence that was collected from those approximate areas? Answer, yes. And for orientation, you can see the tree in that previous image. There's a bloodstain evidence here. And then I don't know, it could be just slightly off the frame is where the placard number 2 was, but this could also have been taken before the placards were put there. I can't recall. Question, you said that you remained at the scene until approximately 10:30? Answer, we did. Question, and did you return the following day? Answer, I did. Question, and when did you return to the specific location on the following day? I did. Question, when? Let's stay for a moment on the 14th. Once it began in the late afternoon, did you notice any change in temperature? Answer, I did. Question, what did you notice? Answer, it became colder. Question, and then the night that you were there, did that continue? Answer, yes. Question, and when you returned the next day, do you know what time you returned? Answer, I thought it was around 10 o'clock. It's somewhere after 9, before 11:30. I can't recall offhand. Question. That would be on Wednesday, February the 15th. Is that correct? Answer. I don't know if it was a Wednesday, but I know it was the following day. Question. The question I wanted to ask you, on the 14th, were you carrying any firearms and any ammunition on that day? Answer. I was. Question. What were you carrying? Answer. I can't remember if I was carrying a Glock 19. I'm pretty sure I was, and it was a 9mm. Question. If you were carrying something else, what would it have been? Answer. Pretty much all I carry, if I would, and I seldom carry it, we have a Sig Sauer 45 caliber 227, and I wear it when I'm in uniform in some other capacity. Question. And the Glock, is that standard issue for Indiana State Police? Answer. No. I believe that was my personal firearm. We're allowed to carry, this is going back a while, I can't remember, but for a long period of time, if you qualify with your personal firearm, you can carry it. And at some point, the department stated that we can't carry personal firearms. So now we carry the Sig Sauer P365, which are 9mm, and that's what I primarily carry. I don't know why that was issued, but it's either a 9mm, I don't know when that was issued, but it's either a 9mm Glock or a 9mm Sig. Question. Did you have a 40 caliber ammunition with you that day? Answer. I did not. Question. When you returned the following day, did you do any chemical tests on the crime scene at that location? Answer. I did. Question. Would you explain to the jury what you did? Answer. Well, to begin with, we were just looking for any additional evidence in daylight, because once we lost the daylight hours, it's, we could only do so much. I mean, it's beneficial to look at some items with the flashlight. We had some area lights out there as well, but to do additional thorough searches, we needed to have daylight. So I arrived there with two other CSIs, which was Dwayne Datzman and Jerry Mahalik. We were the primary ones who returned to the scene, with the purpose of that was for Jerry Mahalik and Dwayne Datzman to examine that area and then beyond that ground zero area with metal detectors. And while they were doing that, I was looking for any additional blood stains or any additional items or objects in that immediate area without disturbing the ground cover at the time. I didn't see any additional blood stains, so we looked at the one tree that seemed to have blood stains on its vertical surfaces. And I used a chemical called leucocrystal violet, which is a reagent for blood. And it's also a presumptive positive test for blood. And all it does is either it's primarily used for latent blood stains, so a latent image or a latent blood stain, or a latent print image is just something you can't see readily with the eyes. So with fingerprints, you have to use some kind of powder to enhance it, to make it visible. And with latent blood stains, you use a chemical that just develops the image, and there would be there that you can't see, and especially due to the bark surfaces, it's difficult to distinguish the different pigmentation of the tree from the stain. So I applied the leucocrystal violet to that area and to other areas within the scene. Question. Looking at State's Exhibit 52, is that a photograph of what it looked like after you applied the chemical? Answer. It is. Leucocrystal violet turns a violet color, and when it reacts to heavier areas or more dense areas of blood stains, it tends to have, as part of a chemical reaction, it'll tend to foam a little bit. So it's not so much the pigment, this is what's very visible in this image if you're looking at the foaming aspects. When I was looking for is if there's any other blood stains that were bleeding in the coloration of the tree, and I didn't really see any of the reactions outside of what was obviously visible previously. Question. Did you know that whether or not any blood, any swabs of the blood on that tree had been obtained on the night before? Answer. I do. Question. And who did that? Answer. I believe Brian Olehy. Question. So this evidence had already been taken from that area when this blood was observed on the tree? Answer. Correct. He took representative stain samples from numerous locations. Question. One question I wanted to ask you about was, let's go back to the next slide. We'll get to that. What do you see here on 53? Answer. It's the portion that's the lower on the counterclockwise portion of the same tree, and no additional latent stains in that area developed. It was primarily just these heavier areas. When the chemical that was applied to them, they tend to foam up, so that's where these lighter color areas are. It's just the foaming actions of those thicker stains. Question. And the previous night you mentioned that these areas from the ground to record document the relative height from the ground of these different stains on the tree? Answer, yes. In addition to having the 3D scan, which is more detailed in placement, we also used conventional measuring methods of using regular surveyor's tape and scale, such to document then before the evidence is collected. Question. Exhibit 54. Is the tree in the just off the center to the right in this photograph? Is that tree that Libby's body was next to? Answer, yes. Question. What does 54 illustrate? Answer. This is a much later from the previous state's exhibit we looked at. This is midway through the portion where I started with this tree, and I worked outward from there. The tree you mentioned, I examined systematically all the sticks, the twigs, the branches, and the leaves to see if there were any items of evidence, or if there could have been something underneath the ground cover. This is one representative photograph of this where eventually everything within that, what we designated as ground zero, and then beyond it several feet, just kept peeling that back. But at some point, with every crime scene, there has to be parameters. You have to just come to a point and say, how far do we go? Do I go an acre? So basically I looked at this, probably 5 or 6 feet outside of ground zero. And this is part of the process. And then in the foreground, you can see this. This is before I completely uncovered it, but this is the area where the large stain was from the leaves. And then in the distance, you can see in the top of this image, you can see Deer Creek. And then there's divers that are continuing to search the entire time I was at this area. I don't know how many hours I spent there, but I spent most of the remainder of that day in the area. Question. Was scene security maintained from the time you arrived on the 14th until once you arrived on the 15th? Was the remaining scene security present? Answer, there were. Question, did you return? Here's another photograph, 55, of the same process you described. Is that from a different angle? Did you return on the following day, the 16th? Answer, I did. Question, we're going to look at State Exhibit 56, the photograph of the Monon High Bridge. Which end are you positioned when you took this photograph? Answer, I believe I'm on the lower left-hand corner, and the side is the public side. Deer Creek's running underneath the bridge. In the left-hand side of the frame, you can kind of see how sheer the bank is and the topography of this area. In the middle section, near the top, you can kind of see where this floodplain is. And you can see it's kind of irregular because especially the trees that are going along the bank create a little slight rise in the ground there. But this is all wooded. But this is the area that I would call the floodplain. It also continues on the far right-hand side of the frame, where you can kind of see how dense the trees were and the topography of the ground. Question, and just to make sure we're oriented, Sergeant Page, where would the victims be? Their bodies have been discovered? Answer, they would be somewhere in the center top of the frame. Question, and to make sure we're oriented, Sergeant Page, where would the victims be? They would be somewhere in the top center of the frame. Around upstream, around the bend, is that correct? Answer, correct. Question, what did you notice about the condition of the bridge when you were there on February 16th? Answer, you can see in the image there are no handrails or guardrails off the side. It's just exposed old timber. Many pieces of the timber were very rotted. There were many gaps where the railroad timbers were missing altogether. Did you cross that bridge yourself? Answer, I did. Do you have a fear of heights? Answer, not if I trust what I'm standing on, but I walked on it. Question, and how would you describe the process being on it? Answer, I thought it was a little sketchy, but I walked across the bridge. Question, what are we looking at? Exhibit 57. Answer, in the upper left-hand portion of the frame, you can see there's some kind of barrier there on the public side. And then you have the bridge that runs across the left-hand side of the frame, and then there's some of these boards, and they kind of create a platform. I'm standing on one of those platforms looking down the Monon Trail itself, the public walking trail, and then the entire remainder of the frame from the center to the right shows how sheer this kind of cliff edge is. We can kind of see the topography rises from the high bridge up a little higher, and then in the lower left-hand corner you can see the creek, and then you can even see in the creek a little bit the water. You can see the creek bottom. Question, what are we looking at in photograph 58? Answer, let me just make sure of something. Hold on a minute. Okay. Hi, Eva. Hi, Mike. The cop that took Richard's first report that they lost should be demoted. Mike says, just another weak state prosecutor. Lawyers drive you crazy. Sure looks like the clown mental health got better and eating. What's the matter? Oh, okay, hold on a minute, Mike. What are you saying here? I would like to know what Richard's wife and daughter are thinking now. Hey, Mike, you missed my last video about that, because I watched the documentary that was on Hulu, and it was 3 different parts, and actually they have a large portion of it with his wife, and she goes through their photographs of when they met, which is like in high school, and she is still thoroughly behind him, believes he did not do this. She is still completely swayed that he did not do this. They didn't have anything about the daughter, but they had about the wife. And if you want to see that, you can see that it is labeled the reaction to that Hulu. And I think if you can watch that Hulu documentary, it's very, very good. And I definitely recommend it. And I'm sorry, Mike, there's not a lot of mods here right now. She's got Gail, but it's late. So I don't know if you're being sarcastic with that. I imagine you are. But it's pretty late. It's 3 o'clock, and a lot of the mods have gone to bed. Hello, Mike. Hello, Eva. Hello, Gail. Thanks for listening, Tree Dog. But yeah, we're going through the trial transcripts of Delphi. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was still, you guys are still around here. And let me go back to this now. Okay. Answer. Now I'm at the exact opposite direction. So the previous image, I was looking towards the public side, and now I'm looking at the private side. So the upper right-hand corner, you can see another barrier, which is a mirror image of the one on the public side. Somebody put crime scene barrier tape up in this location. Near the upper horizon of this image, you can see the light green sandy color. This is all a large lawn area from a residence. Near the center of the frame, you can kind of see where the home was. And I don't know what the address is. I don't know who lives there. And then in the lower left-hand corner of the frame, there's a gravel drive. I looked it up on the map, and it says North 625 West. So I don't know if it's considered a county road or a private drive or an access road. I don't know what you'd call it, but it comes in this area, and there's a slight elevation. And I had mentioned it previously in other exhibits, and then it ties into this private residence, and then the lower side, the left-hand side of this image is this gravel area. Kind of extends just a distance from there to the barrier from the high bridge. So the high bridge is off the frame at the bottom. And then to the immediate left, I noticed that the leaves seem to have been displaced because there's this exposed dirt area that goes down this grade. The grade is steep, but it's navigable. And then it goes to this access road and then goes again to the left-hand side of the frame. This area, just the other side of the access road, is pretty steep, but it leads to a large floodplain area that I mentioned previously, and the location of the bodies of Libby and Abby would be somewhere beyond in these trees on the left-hand side of the frame. Question, across the creek? Answer, yes, and this was taken 2 days later. Question, the next photograph was taken from the access road you described, looking up towards the bridge and that area that you just described, that darkened area just at the side of the bridge. Is that correct? Answer, correct. Question, coming down the hill? Answer, correct. That's the upper left-hand portion of the image. I've now walked past the high bridge. I've gone down this grade and I'm standing on the access road. And when you're walking and you're taking wide-angle lenses, when you're using wide-angle lenses and even zoom lenses, it's a bit of a compression. So it looks like it's a far distance, but I don't recall it being very far. But this goes back to the bridge. The road is relatively level. But to the immediate right, that's off the frame, there's kind of a steep grade, and then that leads into the floodplain. Okay, Exhibit 60, sir, where were you located when you took this photograph? Answer, I walked from the high bridge down off the access road, and you could see in the distance the dark line near the center of the frame, kind of diagonal line, and on the left-hand side of the frame, that's the high bridge. You can see daylight from underneath it and above it through the trees. That's what I consider a type of floodplain area that has all these trees in it. And I walked a little bit farther upstream than the location of the scene, the primary scene, ground zero. And I'm standing on this kind of shallow rock area. So I could be in the middle of the creek without getting too wet. And so this is the part, the majority of the frame is the creek as it goes downstream and then turns around the bend towards the high bridge. Question, the next photograph is number 61. Is that from the same location now looking across the bridge, or I mean across the creek? Answer, yes. From this vantage point, the previous state's exhibit, I'm looking at where the high bridge was to my left, and then I've merely pivoted to my right and I'm showing the other side of the Deer Creek. And then you can see in the middle right-hand portion of this image, some of the barrier tape that's up, and this was the farthest out. You always want to establish, wherever you're working in crime scene, you always want to be generous and take whatever area that is apparent that seems to be involved, and you pick a much larger area because you've examined it. You don't exactly know where those parameters are, so that's why the barrier tape was this far out. Now, more towards the center of the frame is where you'll see the prominent trees are. Inward from that towards the cemetery area is where this scene was located. Question, so the barrier tape that you mentioned, the crime scene tape on the right-hand side, would be upstream area of the crime scene area? Answer, correct. It's the outside leg. Question, look at State Exhibit 62. Answer, it's similar to the previous exhibit. You can see the crime scene barrier tape near the middle lower portion near the center. And then out to that area right of that, that's part of the bank. All these areas of the banks we've examined for days by numerous people, myself included. We didn't see anything along any of these areas of the bank that were more upstream, and you could see the sides of the banks are much more sheer and they have more steeper grade. This area near the left of the frame of the bank is kind of a grassy area, and that's one location that has a more shallow grade. But these other areas, especially these trees that are right near the creek bank, it's kind of an elevated area. Question, and how, when you designate the area as a shallow or a more gradual bank, I should say, that area was where in relation to where the bodies were found approximately? Answer, The bodies were just from the grassy portion, as I recall it. And of course, again, you know, I have a wide angle lens and there is some compression and it adds a little distortion. But in this particular image, if you're thinking more from left to right and kind of in, it would be near the center-ish of the frame. Question. When were you at the crime scene on February 14th and you were near the body of Abby? Did you notice anything about the condition of her clothing, particularly the jeans she had on? Answer. Yes. Question. What did you notice? Answer. My recollection is that her clothes were damp, but it's been so long that I didn't make specific notes, and I don't know exactly where it was damp. I just remember her clothes seeming damp. Question. And I think it's our final photograph, 63. That simply is from looking straight onto the bank, that location from the rocks where you were standing. Answer. Correct. I'm just making quarter turns clockwise. So I went from one end to the bank to the other end of the bank, and now I'm showing the extreme other side where you can see not only the end of the barrier tape, but you can also see the other terrain that's more upstream on the right-hand side of the frame. And then the ground zero would be located somewhere beyond these trees in the center left portion of the frame. Question. You may return to your seat. A group of CSIs gathered again on Sunday, the 19th of February. Is that correct? Answer. They did. Question. And did you participate in that? Answer. I did. Question. And how do you recall how many Indiana State Police crime scene investigators participated in that search? Answer. I believe there were 9, including myself. Okay, and then let's see, they took a break and then they're going to do the cross of him. And I'm just going to see how we're doing here. How's everybody doing? Hello, Jeanette. Hello, Murder of Crows. Everybody's okay in here? Okay, just checking on you guys. Making sure that nobody's asking me anything. Let me see how long the cross is here. It's going to be pretty long, and it looks like it is. I'd rather save the cross for tomorrow since it's 3:18. I'd rather save cross for tomorrow. I didn't even share this video out, so I'm going to have to do that. That'll be after the fact. Let me just see here. Let's just do this really quick about this one thing. 1 second. Give me 1 little second. This is your AMSR. Okay. There, I just want to just pop this here. Pop it over here. Just so I make sure that I do this, because just bear with me for 1 second. Please. If I don't do this, I'm really doing nothing but kind of not doing what I'm supposed to, right? By sharing out the video. And I tried to get on because we had an auction before, and I was trying to explain some stuff. And then about the trial.
To the woman who
And so
hasn't
we were a little bit late, and I just thought, oh my gosh,
tomorrow morning
it's late already. I'm not going to go crazy. I'll just go and share it after, and I just want to do it because I get like OCD that I don't do it. So if you could just remember to hit a thumbs up, that would be great. And I'm done with the sharing now. I just have to throw it once in Slack, and then I'm done. I'm going to come back and okay, now I'm going to go over here, back to where you guys are. Where the heck are you guys? Nope, nope. No. There we are. Okay. So let's, I guess, do our word cookie daily. Right, Murder of Crows? It's time for that right now. And I'm sorry that I got like sick during the auction. That was crazy. I don't know what the freak. I don't think that's ever happened to me before that I really remember from drinking water. That was absolutely crazy, and I'm so sorry to everybody. I feel like I destroyed that auction for everybody, and I'm really sorry about that. And I will make it up. I'll do a makeover tomorrow if people want it, and I feel bad. I didn't mean to get, definitely didn't mean to feel sick like that. Or to just, I don't know what the heck was wrong with me. To drink that much water at that. So I couldn't get enough of it. Fixable, yeah, that's good. Yeah, Murder of Crows, you don't even know what happened. We went out tonight, right? Our friends wanted to kind of celebrate with us because we really hadn't gone out for our anniversary, which was July 20th, because of everything that was going on, okay? It was a great deal of stress. It was just, you know, it was a lot. And so we decided, you know, getting the verdict yesterday, we were going to go out yesterday, and then we decided, okay, we'll go out tonight. So I took a swim, came home, took a shower. We went to dinner, had a nice dinner. We even went out for ice cream. Then we came home. It was close to the auction, and Evie came on, and she was drinking this bottle of water. And so I said, oh, wow, I'm dying of thirst. And so I took my Yeti bottle and I filled it up with ice and I filled it up with water. And murder of crows, I downed about like 20 ounces of water just like in 1 minute. And then I got another one and I drank that down. And then I started to feel like pain in my chest. I felt like I was going to vomit. I could have very easily. And then, Scooter's like, oh my gosh, go lay down. So I was still trying to do the auction, to do people's things, but I couldn't sell any myself. I was trying to put in the stuff, but I was really not feeling well at all. And I think, I don't know, it took about an hour. I got a little bit better. I came in, I did a little bit of something, but by then it was like, I don't know, I just feel bad. I feel bad. So yeah. Yeah. It was weird. And you want to hear the weird thing? As sick as I felt, I still wanted more water. Okay? That's crazy, right? That's absolutely crazy. I had to like stop myself from drinking more water. That's crazy. Just, I don't know. I did try Flab and I don't think it worked. Nope. Oh, how about, nope. How about, it was too much water too quick, and it was ice cold water, and I got like 2 ice cream headaches, but stupid me, I just kept drinking it, okay? Because I heard too that if you get like that ice cream headache, if you drink more, it was, I don't know, I did everything wrong. Murdered crows. It's crazy. Crazy. You got life with me there? Okay. Got one more here. What is this other one? I don't know what this one is. This last one right here. It's got it. Oh, wait a minute. No. Flicks? No. Can't be like that. It's got to be an L. Oh, yeah, yeah, not for much longer. I went through some of the Delphi stuff, UHP. I felt bad that I got sick at the auction and kind of made that not so good. Hang on one second. Okay, I'm back. But yeah, I mean, I just want to take a look. I've been not on social media today, and let's see what's going on. But just see what there's. So a little bit before I went on and looked at a couple of things. There's a Kentucky boy missing previously. Hope they find him in a child endangerment case. I hope they find that little kid. Let me put his picture out there. Just oopsie. What is going on with this? Now my whole thing doesn't. Okay, now this is whole. Oh well, I don't know. It's really, what the heck is going on with this? Get out of here. Okay, it doesn't want me to do anything. I don't know what it's doing. Now it's closed up. I have no idea what's going on. None whatsoever. It's acting really stupid. Alright, let me see if I can do it again. I'll just... This little... Let's see, 10-year-old boy. Come on. Okay. This is, let me see here. They're searching for Jaden Spicer. He vanished from his Red Hit home, Panbowl Branch Road, sometimes between Tuesday evening and early Wednesday morning. Blonde hair, blue eyes, 5'1". On Thursday, his mother, Felicia Spicer, formerly Felicia Gross, provided a handwritten plea concerning her missing son. So, have they found him? She has a past involvement in a child endangerment case. Spicer has asked for her privacy. Did they find him? Let me see. I hope so. I hope they found him. No, maybe not yet. Let me see. August 8th, 9th, 10th. I hope they find him alive and well. That's sad, and that the parent did. He was last seen wearing blue Sonic pajamas on August 5th. It's been 3 days. Yeah, I don't know. Keep your eyes peeled if you're in the area or whatever. Hopefully he's found alive and well. But I think I'm going to go and try to lay down a little bit. And like I said, I'll try to make the auction up if people are upset about that and try to do that. But everybody be good. I love you guys. God bless. Have a good night and see you guys later on. Okay? Be good.